Last year I read around 50 novels, and in this video I'm going to attempt to review all those 50 books in this many minutes. Without further ado, let's get into it. So I started my year reading Dogs of War by Adam Jakowski, which is the first book in a duology, and while I enjoyed the first half, the second half just became a bit too repetitive. But yeah, if you want to read a sci-fi novel that has super clever dogs in it and is relatively short, then I would recommend Dogs of War, but I think I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I picked up Hellmouth by Giles Christensen, and this is a medieval horror fantasy novel. It was proper scary, and you can read it in one sitting. It is that short, but I adored it. I think I gave it 5 out of 5 stars and would highly recommend it. Then I read The Children of Gods and Finding Men by Shauna Lawless, the first book in a Irish mythological fantasy. One of my favorite series by my wife, so I was like, I need to pick it up. And also I met Shauna Lawless and she is absolutely lovely. Now this book is very, very well written, but like historical fiction slash fantasy is just not really my jam. So ultimately, I haven't continued the series yet. But yeah, if you're looking for like a mythology slash historical fantasy that is very, very well written, then I can highly recommend this series and book. Then I read Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. It's one of my most disappointing reads of the year. I don't enjoy whimsical fantasy types of stories. Definitely would not recommend this one. Then I'm just gonna group all the series together. I read the Tawnyman trilogy by Robin Hobb, which is the third series in the realm of the Elderlings. The first book in the series, Fool's Errand, is absolutely beautifully written. The character work that Robin Hobb does in this whole series with Fitz is one of the best characters of all time. Now, I did enjoy the first book, Fool's Errand, the most, but as a trilogy, I also enjoyed it immensely. I think I would probably give it 4 out of 5 stars. I mean, if you have read Farsi trilogy, then you definitely need to pick up Tawnyman, because it's just more Fitz. He gets his heart broken so many times, but Robin Hobb is just a masterfully author and storyteller, and yeah, I'm very, very happy I read this one, and I can't wait to continue the series this year. Now, one thing that has literally leveled up how I work is this incredible office chair from Flexispot called BS12 Pro. Now, for a couple of years, I have been sitting in a small office chair, and I have dreamt of upgrading, and that day has finally arrived. Now, the BS12 Pro is a multifunctional adjustable fabric ergonomic chair, and besides being probably the most comfortable office chair I've ever sat on, it truly blows me away how many things you can do with this chair. This chair has a dynamic back support, 3D adjustable armrests that can go up and to the sides, a headrest that can move up and down, and a seat that can go up and down and back and forth, allowing you to customize exactly how you prefer to sit. It kind of also works as a reading chair. Now, you can also get this chair in 2 different colors, and while both are great, I personally went for the gray version and I think it looks beautiful. I have used Flexispot desks now for more than a year and I love it, and I now have this incredible office chair, and I truly can't recommend this company enough. Now, I will leave a link in the description down below if you're interested in buying the BS12 Pro. Thank you so much to Flexispot for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the video. Then I picked up The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison, one of my least favorite reads of the year. I know this is a booktube darling and also a darling in the fantasy community, but man, I could not get into this book. I felt it was way too slow paced, the prose was just way too much, and I didn't find the characters interesting. I think I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, and it's honestly amazing that I even got to the end of it. Then the DNF2 books, I'll just go very briefly through them. Dead House Gates by Steven Erikson and Gunmetal Gods. There were aspects of both of these books that I did enjoy, but overall the story was either just too complex or just too bleak. Especially Gunmetal Gods was very, very dark. But I kind of want to give Molassen a 3rd try. Yes, I've tried Molassen twice, and I kind of feel it slowly starting to call back on me. So I might in this year just start the series again and see if I'll finally enjoy it. But yeah, none of those 2 books were badly written, they just weren't for me. And then I read Of War and Ruin by Ryan Cahill. I mean, this book is, look how big it is, absolutely brilliant. In this book we have like 10 different plot lines or something, and they're all compelling. It's epic, and Ryan Cahill just gets better and better. Now, this is not my favorite book in the series, but it is a great time, and I think if you read it on Kindle, it's like 1500 pages. If you enjoy classic fantasy that feels modern, check out Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. And then I read the first 3 books in The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. The Grace of Kings, one of my favorites of the year. The Wall of Storms is top 2, I think. I think I put it in my 2nd or 1st spot of favorite read of the year. What a masterpiece. The Whale Throne, the 3rd book, is also very, very good. It kind of feels like the first act to a conclusion, which it is, because I think Ken Liu originally wrote that 3rd and 4th book together as 1 volume, but it just became too big. I still need to read the last book in the Dandelion Dynasty, but this series is incredible, and when I have read the last book, I need to make a video about this whole series, because this is, I mean, Ken Liu is criminally underrated. He is an absolute genius, and more people need to pick up the series. Then I picked up The Way of a Dan by Philip Chase. I still need to pick up book 2 and 3. I was very, very impressed. This is a debut novel, and Philip Chase, he's been working on this series for like 18 years, I think so, and you can definitely feel it. It is very, very rare for an author to have such polished prose in a debut. And yeah, if you enjoy classical fantasy, because this feels very, very classic, but you want some classic fantasy that is done really, really well, then I can highly recommend this one, and I'm hoping to continue the series this year. Then I read the Books of Babel Quartet. So there's 4 books in the series, and I made a video talking about my experience reading especially the last book, but also the first 3 books. There were elements in all the first 3 books that I really enjoyed, especially the world building and the writing style. But every single book in the first 3 I had some issues with, but the last book is one of my least favorite books of the year. I felt it was absolutely criminal what he did to our protagonist. It also felt like one of the worst uses of Deus Ex Machina, where the author just didn't know what to do with the plot anymore and just invented a new thing, and yeah, it was ridiculous. But yeah, if you want to hear my full thoughts about the Books of Babel, then I have a video talking about my experience reading the series. Then I read Sealed Empire by Norbert Sivicic. I think this is a self-published series. Absolutely gorgeous cover, and I read this book in like 3 days. It was a massive surprise. Like, the prologue is like 30 pages, but it's such a good prologue, and this feels like a medieval fantasy that also has some crazy science fiction elements. Yeah, it is absolutely weird, and in a lot of ways this kind of reminded me of Illborn by Daniel T. Jackson, that it felt just so overly addictive. But this series has one of the most unexpected, craziest ending I've ever come across in the genre. It was so crazy that I'm unsure if I'll enjoy the second book in the series, but we'll see. But yeah, I had a great time with this one. And then I read The Book That Wouldn't Burn, the first book in the Library trilogy or something. This was basically a disappointment for me. Now, it was well written, it was interesting, but this is the 3rd book I read by Mark Lawrence. So I've tried the first book in 3 different series, and all of them have been 3 stars, and that was the same case here. I think the writing style was good, the plot was interesting, but I didn't connect to any of the characters, and the later half, it just became too meta for me, too crazy, and I won't be continuing the series. Then we have Islas Reach by Liliana Francesca, I think that's her name. This is a debut self-published fantasy novel, and I think it's a duology. Now, I think the first book had some really great ideas, but I also think that maybe the plot was a tad bit too ambitious and probably could have benefited from just scaled down slightly. But I did have a overall good time with this one, but I'm unsure if I'll continue the series when the next book comes out. Then I hosted a read-along for all 3 books in the High Child trilogy by R.J. Barker. Now, I've also made a full spoiler-free deep dive into this series, which I would highly recommend if you're looking for a fresh fantasy that brings something very new to the genre. I mean, this is one of the most unique series I've read. I found it very, very compelling. It does have quite a steep learning curve, but yeah, if you're looking for a nautical fantasy set in a world that is almost just made up of islands and has massive, massive sea dragons, then this is the series for you. What I really loved about this one is just how unique it felt. It felt like something different to the genre, and I love those types of series. And then I read The Combat Codes by Alexander Darwin. This was a massive surprise. I read this also in like 3 or 4 days. I just found it to be very, very compelling. We have a great underdog, a really good mentor, and we're basically set in this world where there's some kingdoms that are at war, but the way they resolve all the conflicts is through duels. So we don't have these massive battles where lots of armies come together, but instead people train out their whole lives and then they duel for maybe to win a disagreement or maybe win a piece of land or something. They duel, and yeah, it was very fascinating. It feels like an urban kind of sci-fi fantasy novel, so it felt very interesting. Great writing style, great pacing in my opinion, and I'm hoping to get to the second book this year. Then I read all 3 books in the Red Rising trilogy, so I haven't read the second arc yet. But Red Rising, I found the first book to be a bit of a disappointment, but Golden Sun and Morning Star were considerably better. Now, the only thing here is that I expected this series to become one of my all-time favorite series when I picked it up, and that just didn't happen. Which also made me feel slightly disappointed with the reading experience. Even though Golden Sun, I put that book in my top 10 of this year because it was incredible, really. But yeah, if you enjoy sci-fi that is quite character-driven, doesn't focus too heavily on concepts, even though there's some brilliant concept in this one. And the first book is kind of like a battle royale, kind of Hunger Games novel, while book 2 and 3 are more like political space opera. I would highly recommend it, and the hype for the series is immense, and I'm hoping to continue the series this year. Then I read Recursion and Dark Matter. Now these are two independent standalones, but a lot of people often group them together because they're both sci-fi thrillers. And yeah, Dark Matter, I enjoyed it slightly more than Recursion, but both of these books are incredible. I read Dark Matter in less than 24 hours. I read this one in like 2 or 3 days. It looks like they're maybe a bit thick, but there's not much text on each page, and you will just flip through because it is, the plot is so compelling. I need to read Upgrade and read lots of more other books by Blake Crouch because yeah, this was one of my favorite books of the year. It's a massive surprise. And please, if you have a Kindle, download the sample for Dark Matter and just read it. I think you'll be hooked just from the sample. It's that good. And then I read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I did not enjoy this book. I don't enjoy horny dragons, and I will not be continuing the series. I actually vlogged my reading experience with this one, so if you want to see my thoughts while reading this huge sensation, then you can check that one out, but yeah, won't recommend this one. And then I read the first arc in the Echo Saga by Philip C. Crankville. So this is a 9-book series split into 3 trilogies, and I read now the first 3 books in the series, and yeah, I had a wonderful time with this one. It's not gonna be like one of the best series ever, but similarly to The Band on the Broken, this feels very classic. I mean, we have elves, we have dwarves, we have dragons, and so on and so on. But it's paced really well. There's a lot of great moments, and it has a lot of the tropes we come to love. So if you want something that feels familiar but also refreshing, then this is the series for you. I had a wonderful time with the series, and I would highly recommend it to all John Gwynne and Ryan Kyle fans. Then I read A Sword of Bronze and Ashes by Anna Smith Spark, a book that I did not really enjoy. It's described as a folk horror, lyrical, high fantasy, which is the reason why I picked it up, because I was like, this sounds so unique. While the plot is fascinating and our protagonist is a retired warrior that is a mom now, and I think she's going through menopause and stuff like that. A lot of different interesting things with this book. I just found the writing style to be too flowery, too lyrical for my taste, and the plot to be way too slow, and it's actually one of my most disappointing reads of the year. Then I read the first 2 books in the Children of Time trilogy. Children of Time has become one of my all-time favorite books now. It's so good. And Children of Ruin is one of my biggest disappointments of my life now, because I did not connect a single page. So this can be read as a standalone, read this one. I made a full spoiler-free video also deep diving into this book, because it is so brilliant. Even though the second book, in my opinion, wasn't that good, you should still pick this up. Then I read Talon Sister by Jen Williams, a book that I was so excited about, because the Winning Flame trilogy is one of my favorite series of all time, and unfortunately Talon Sister, I had very mixed feelings on it. Now it has huge griffins, which is great. It has this strange, odd world building we come to expect from a Jen Williams novel, but I just didn't feel compelled by the characters. And while the world building was so good, I just felt like the plot and the pacing was just way too slow, way too slow for my taste. And when I had finished this book, I was like, I'm a bit intrigued, but the sad thing is that the more time that has gone, the less interested I am in continuing this series. So that is probably not a good sign. Now this is a duology, so there's only one more book coming out, so maybe I'll pick it up when the next book comes out. But yeah, Talon Sister, I did enjoy my reading experience. I'm glad I read it, but it's not gonna be one of my favorite reads of the year, unfortunately. Then I picked up the Powder Maid trilogy. I read the first 2 books, and I'm hoping to read the 3rd book this month. But yeah, this is one of my biggest surprises of the year. I've adored the first 2 books. It is a steampunk / flintlock fantasy that feels kind of like the Age of Madness trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, but it has more fantastical elements. And yeah, it is just so good. There's especially one plot line that I love that kind of feels like a Sherlock Holmes kind of plot line, where we had this detective that is investigating lots of stuff, but then we also have like these huge conflicts and gods, and yeah, it's so good and so well paced. A lot of plot twists and backstabbing, and yeah, I can't wait to read the 3rd book, and I really need to read all the books in this universe now because it's just that good. Then I read City of Brass for the Viking book club. I gave this one 3 stars. While the world building was very fascinating and the writing style was good, I just felt like the story was a bit too focused on one area, and there's also a tiny bit too more romance in this novel. I think the 2nd and 3rd book I'll probably enjoy way more, so maybe I should pick up that one. But yeah, I'm glad I read City of Brass, but it's not a book I'm going to be continuing. Then I read The Troop by Nick Cotter for Halloween, and this was a great read. I had a great time with this one. I mean, there's definitely quite a lot of gore in this one, and we basically follow this leader that has like 3 young boys with him, or young like teenagers. They go on a camping trip, and on this island suddenly a man arrives that he's ravenous, he's skinny, and he's acting crazy, and from there everything just hits the fan. This island is quarantined for a reason I won't get into. Yeah, it's very compelling. I wouldn't say Nick Cotter is any Stephen King. Stephen King is better when it comes to his character work. But yeah, I don't really have any major criticisms here, except that it's probably going to be a book that I won't remember for my whole life, but I'm glad I read it. Then I read The Dragonbone Chair by Ted Williams. This is now one of my all-time favorite series. This series and this book inspired George R. R. Martin to write A Song of Ice and Fire, but it's also been a huge inspiration for Christopher Paolini, Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rothfuss, Neil Gaiman. It's an icon in the genre, and I'm so glad I read the first book, and I'm hoping to read the 2 other books in this trilogy this year. Ted Williams, he has one of the most beautiful prose I've ever encountered in the genre, and I can't recommend this enough. It's slow-paced, very, very slow-paced, but if you can get lost in the writing style and the world building, then I think you will absolutely love it. I made a full spoiler-free review where I also deep dive into this book, so yeah. If you're interested, check that one out. Then I read Bookshops and Bone Dust by Charles Baldry, the prequel novella to Legends and Latte. If you enjoyed Legends of Latte, then I think you will also love this one. The plot is a bit more intricate in this one compared to Legends of Latte, but I think both are brilliant. Personally, I slightly prefer Legends of Latte, but it might just be because I read that one first. Then I read The Trials of Empire in the Empire of the Wolf trilogy. I don't have a physical copy with me here because the book isn't even out yet. While the first book focuses a lot on the legal and philosophical aspects, the third book is almost straight up medieval horror. But I thought it was very good. It's probably my least favorite book in the trilogy, but I will still give it 4 stars, and overall, this trilogy has now become one of my all-time favorite series. And I also made a full spoiler-free video where I deep dive into this series. Then I picked up Ascension by Nicholas Binge. I picked up this one because a lot of people compared this book to a lot of Blake Crouch's books. While this is a sci-fi thriller, it's not as good as Recursion Dark Matter by any means. The first 2/3 I loved, and the last act I didn't particularly love. So very, very mixed feelings to this one. But yeah, if you enjoy sci-fi thrillers, I would still recommend it, albeit check out Dark Matter and Recursion first. Then I picked up The Light and Death by Dennis Schramer for our Viking book club. This kind of felt like a middle grade kind of fantasy, and not really a book I would ever have picked up on my own, and I just don't think I was the target market. Now with the Viking book club, I don't really have a say in which books we read, and I didn't really expect to enjoy this one, and I didn't, so I feel kind of bad for stating it, but yeah, it's not really a book I loved. And then I picked up The Silver Blood Promise by James Logan, a book that comes out next year, and it was so good. It kind of felt like Lies of Lamora meets Uncharted. It was just riveting, so many plot twists, incredible pacing. We have a good underdog. It was just a great time. Now, you can argue that James Logan maybe relies too much on plot armor, because there is a lot of situations where you're just like, there's no way our protagonist would ever have survived this. But if you can just not think too critically about some of the plot points, then this book could easily become one of your favorite books of all time, because it was just so good. So those are the around 50 books I read this year. I might have missed some books because I was looking through Goodreads, and Goodreads doesn't always register the books I mark as read. I mean, this website sucks. But yeah, have you read any of these books? Which books do you think I should prioritize reading this year? Let me know your thoughts. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. Now, if you want to support what I do here, then I do have a Patreon. Now, a reason why I created a Patreon was to find a new way to reinvest to the channel, because basically since I created my Patreon, I spent around 100% of my earnings to hire an editor to do a couple of videos for me a month. Now, since creating my Patreon, an editor has done more than 20 videos for me on my channel, so it makes a huge difference. Now, if you join my Patreon, you will also get some benefits. For example, you'll get a name in my videos like these guys. You'll also be able to join the exclusive Viking book club where every month we read one book together, and you might be the one to put the book forward. This month we're reading this book, and next month we're reading this book. You also get to vote on my next read, get access to exclusive videos like a wrap up or even book reviews, and so much more. But this is totally voluntary, but all support is much appreciated.